everybody. Welcome to TABNation, the official podcast of Trekkers Against Bullying. TAB is an organization of Star Trek and science fiction fans who are dedicated to the eradication of bullying within fandom and the universe. Today with us, our regular host, Ellie, director of TAB, Rex Wood. Say hello, everybody. And of course, our newest host, Bonnie. Bonnie's going to give us a little bit of an introduction right now. And then, of course, you know me, Cat King.
All right, and we have a super special guest, Cirroc, too. Don't forget.
Of course, yes.
So I'm going to do my disclaimer bit again. So my name is Bonnie or Bonfire. I also cosplay Seven, and I'm here from a peer recovery perspective. I'm a peer recovery advocate, not a therapist, not a physician. So anything I talk about isn't, advice in that nature. But I'm here as a subject matter expert to talk about some of the neuroscience and some of our tools in dealing with bullying. So thanks for the intro.
Awesome. And our special guest today played the most famous captain in Star Trek Sun, Jake Sisko on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And now he's a host and star of his own podcast called The Seventh Rule Star Trek podcast that is co-hosted by himself, Ryan Tusk, and Melissa Longo. And as, of course, Cirroc is also a spokesperson for Trekkers Against Bullying. Welcome, Cirroc. We're really glad to have you today.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So we just kind of wanted to get into it right away and talk a little bit about bullying, your experience in Cirroc with bullying in the industry in Hollywood. And if you have any specific examples of bullying that you've experienced in your career, anything you want to share with us, we would love to hear your story.
Yeah, I've experienced bullying. I think a lot of people have. I don't think I'm unique in that respect. You get bullied for different things. Especially I remember in school, getting bullied a few times over the choices of clothes I wore or the way that I talk. Some people were offended by it, and they let me know. And they bully you and they kind of voice their opinions. I guess that's really one of the big things about bullying that I came here to talk about, which is, people all have different opinions about everything, every subject,
Right.
how they want to live their life, what they want to do with their life, what they want to, how they choose to exist on this planet. And we all have variations of our own belief systems, whether it's religion or whatever it is, it's just our own belief system. I think the problem is not that we all have these kinds of differences, but that we shame people for having their differences or for being different. And I think that's where we can address change by, really explaining to the bullies and those that are bullied what's going on at that moment and how they're hurt, how they're being hurtful, and how they can still have their ideas about whatever they believe without infringing upon the serenity and peace of an individual who's choosing to live their own life.
Yeah, that's really powerful what you just said about allowing other people to have serenity and peace and be able to coexist with one another. Let's see if Rex did, or Ellie or Bonnie, did you want to ask Cirroc a question?
Well, I think one of the biggest things we're seeing now, and it's happening, unfortunately, throughout the whole fandom, not just through Star Trek, but Star Wars and all the other ones. We are seeing a kind of a toxic relationship going on out there right now with people that, kind of think they own the genre. We've talked about that before, and new fans coming on. And one of the things that we see a lot is there are opinions, and then there are people taking it too far. And what we see a lot is people that are really chastising people and actually making fun of them on things that they may not know. Star Trek has a lot of different things in it, and I'm the same way. I don't know everything about it. I've been a fan for a long time, but when we're going through and looking at Facebook and Twitter and the different kinds of social media right now, we're seeing a lot of people that will actually take it to an extreme, because somebody doesn't know something. And then it will start to get into a little bit of name calling. And then the next thing you know, there's a lot of bullying going on between those people. One of our jobs here at TAB is to kind of point that out when we see it. And that's one thing that we are trying to do, is work with social media about how can we change that. Star Trek is not supposed to be that type of atmosphere. And so we're seeing a lot of that going on right now with the fans. Alex Kurtzman wrote an article in 2020 where he talked about toxic fandom within Star Trek, just from looking at people in the new series and what people were saying about the new series. And so our big thing is to try to help these people that are thinking they own the fandom. I don't know what experiences you have seen out there on Twitter, Cirroc, when it comes to this stuff or not. Have you seen much of anything?
I stay far away from social media.
Yeah.
For several reasons, but this could be one of them. I can add this to the list.
Yep.
But one of the big problems for me is, when you have social media, a lot of those people are anonymous, and they're able to express their views without actually owning it in person. And the bullying that I experienced, was direct bullying. It was face to face. It was like you got to hear the words, you knew who had a problem with you or whatever their problem was. And I think both of them are just as impactful if you allow yourself to, if those words sit uncomfortably with you. And, the problem is that the gatekeepers of the fandoms out there really should understand, especially in the case with Star Trek, they should understand that Star Trek is an inclusive show that really spends a lot of time and energy, and essentially the basis of the principle of it is this collective idea of working together, of bridging the gap of differences between species and cultures and societies, and also to approach situations from the perspective of non-judgmental, not to be somebody who's casting this kind of aspersions on people in a very stereotypic or group think type manner. So yeah, the social media aspect of it is a new dynamic that's allowing bullying to flourish in ways that it did not before. Because, like I said, in the past, you had to face-to-face confront somebody, or maybe sometimes you would hear people talking behind your back and it would get around to you. But in this way, it could be more anonymous, which allows for people to feel more free to just say hurtful things. And I think that's the big problem there, is the idea when you set out to hurt somebody's feelings, when you set out to criticize them because of the way they look or, their nationality, then you're directly engaging in conflict. There's no problem with having a discussion of ideas and exchanging ideas if it's something that's comes from a place of trying to understanding. But if it comes from a place of trying to put somebody down, then you've already started in the wrong direction, and you're not extending a hand. You're not trying to have an understanding. You're not trying to welcome people into the thing. If you feel like you know all about Star Trek and you want to express that, then a good way to do it is to come from the perspective of I want to bring these people, whoever they are, in, and I like to inform them or, educate them about whatever it is I'm talking about, as opposed to I want to put somebody down and they don't know enough and I'm going to shame them for their lack of knowledge or for their lack of understanding. That's where the big problem lies.
And we're seeing a lot of, when I'm looking at the newer Star Trek that's out now, because from the time that you were in Deep Space Nine, which if you look at that series, that was probably one of the most that to me pushed the diversity and actually pushed the boundaries of that. I think it was the first series with Star Trek that actually really pushed that a lot. I'm seeing a lot of people that are having trouble with the new series because they all feel like there's an agenda, right? There's an agenda. There's a reason why they're doing what they're doing right now. And yeah, there might be a little bit of one of pushing the inclusiveness, which is what we need to do. But I'm seeing a lot of people that have the attitude of, why are the writers doing this? Why are they changing, why are they changing characters and things that the characters never were before? We're seeing that with Picard a little bit right now. And everybody's asking about those questions about, we never assumed that these characters were this way, and now the writers are making them different. And so I'm seeing a lot of people that are having issues with some of that that's going on. We hear about, quote unquote, woke world and things like that. And we're seeing a lot of that where people are, I don't think they're looking at the point that Star Trek has always been inclusive. It's always been about IDIC. It's always been about that. And people, in some ways, you kind of look at what they're writing and it's like, how are you a Star Trek fan? Do you not understand what Star Trek is about? And so there's that battlement that goes on in a lot of chat groups with the people that actually, the ones that actually get it and the ones that don't get it. And unfortunately, it does happen to be some of the older fans that I see that don't get the inclusiveness, that things are changing. The world has changed, as we know. There's a lot going on out there. And so I think a lot of the people are not realizing what Star Trek is about, or not remembering what Star Trek is about. So it's been a big issue out there in social media about where the new shows are going, especially Picard. I've seen things just recently about Picard, about people not accepting what's going on with them, and why is there agendas, and why do writers have agendas, and why are they trying to push political views? Star Trek's always been political. I don't care what anybody says. You can go back to the 60s, and there were statements made in the 60s. Roddenberry, definitely had some parts of political within the group. I mean, if you go back and look at a lot of episodes. So it's continuing to be an issue out there with people just not understanding sometimes what Star Trek is about,
Yeah, I do see a lot of that happening in all spheres of the world, essentially. You see a lot of division in the country, in the world. And what you have is these two conflicting things that are happening. There is the past, present, and future. It's really simple, actually. It reminds me of the not the paw wraiths, but the prophets that would visit Cisco, and they would ask him, what is time? What is time? And because they didn't see time from their perspective. It's a linear thing for us, but it's nothing that the prophets experience. But what I say when I bring that up is, what I'm saying is, with the past, you've got tradition, you've got longstanding cultural norms, you've got what you've built up as far as ideology, and of course we have the present, in which we're discussing now, what's happening in the present. But you also have the future, where you have people that are looking towards the future, trying to change and make things better. Whether their approach is right or wrong, that's what they're doing. And you're always going to have this. It's always going to be a fight between holding on to traditions and rewriting traditions and changing the landscape. And so there's always going to be that battle there between people who want to hold on to what was and people who want to create something new. The problem we're having here is a place of where we're not discussing ideas, and we're not discussing things from the perspective of trying to have an understanding or a cooperation or togetherness. We're all in this thing together, and if you are combative or looking for conflict, then it will only continue to escalate this, and we won't have a understanding. We won't have a cooperation. Star Trek has been political. I have to say from the beginning, they did the first interracial kiss. The television itself is political. It reflects certain values of the time and what can and cannot be is accepted. When Lucille Ball was married to Ricky Ricardo on that show, they weren't allowed to sleep in the same beds, even though they were husband and wife on a television show, and really husband and wife. Mm-hmm. They weren't allowed to show them in the bed together because of whatever was going on at the studios and what they felt like was the right political thing to put out, whatever stance they were taking on that. So there are visual images of things creeping into the landscape of television. It's always going to be there. Star Trek has pushed the boundaries on what those things could be, and set out to change some of those things and bring in this multi-ethnic cast, which was really a new idea in the beginning. And so they've pushed boundaries in those kinds of ways. The idea, I thought, was to approach these kinds of subject matter in a science fiction setting so that we can discuss these kinds of issues and leave them open-ended, or leave them for the viewer to process and question and think about what side they feel connected to.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you were talking, I mean, you could also talk about like Dick Van Dyke was the same way, right? They weren't allowed to sleep in the beds together. You look at all that stuff, go back to the Brady Bunch, go back to all these shows that time period, they couldn't do certain things. I think the Brady Bunch, actually, you did see Carol and her husband, Michael, I think that was his name, Mike, in a bed together. Okay. But that was kind of the first time, but that got to be into the 70s where it was accepted a little bit better. But in the early 60s and things like that, it was like, we are not going to show people together that way, even though we knew it happened, right? We know it happens, obviously. But but at that time, it was just, this is the way it's going to be. And as Star Trek developed in the 60s, you started to see that, like you were talking about the first interracial kiss. Absolutely. That was a big deal, that happening. So, I mean, you look at how we were pressing the boundaries and how we kind of still have, unfortunately, those people that are not realizing where we're going. And I love what you said about, us kind of putting this into science fiction, kind of taking the fact that we take these different things that are either political views or social views, and we put them into science fiction. And like you said, leave them open for discussion at that point. And I think that's one thing that happened really great in Deep Space Nine. There was further they could have gone. And I know that we've talked about this several times, even on your podcast, The Seventh Rule, that even during that time period, even though they were pushing it, there were still places they couldn't go that they wanted to go at that point. So I totally see exactly what you're talking about. Bonnie, let's talk a little bit about a little bit about the science and that about bullying and stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, interestingly enough, I was actually going to backtrack we're talking about science, but where I started jumping into the bullying conversation within the Trek fandom was when we started talking about fantasy. So our episode 8, the Elysian Kingdom, that was quite pivotal for me to sort of witness people articulating what I don't think they were really getting down to the bottom of what they were bothered by, because we do have a history within Star Trek of having, those fantasy kind of campy, goofy, and I can understand where the cadence of it was maybe a little soon into the season, for us getting used to the characters, but in the big grand scheme of things, what I started to witness was just the personal attacks. And again, I know there's criticism and this is the name of the game, but the personal attacks on the writers, oh, they must be on drugs, they must be crazy. And that's where I started getting a little ruffled, and I eventually did end up posting a big long thread in there about this, saying like, hey, listen, there's ways that we can express our criticism. And I have gone in with people who are intentionally, ruffling up discord and say like, hey, okay, let's set that aside. Like, what is your actual, contention with this episode? Like, let's talk through it. And then try to find that area of like, okay, yeah, I agree with you. Like, that was a little too soon, or maybe this was a different, this could have been done a different way. But at the end of the day, I think it was actually about something else that we're really ruffled about. So I say all that, and back to the science of it is when we start delving into the communication online. And Cirroc, high five to you because I've taken breaks from it can get treacherous. Um, but what's happening is, unfortunately, we're all getting these immediate feedback loops. And Nana talked about this a little bit on the last episode that we had with her about the serotonin. There's also like a cortisol piece that's in play. So we're all kind of, modulating each other. So when we step up to our laptops or our phones or whatever device we're on, and we're approaching a bully, like that's definitely a moment where we should take a moment within ourselves and just kind of take a deep breath and say, am I responding, or am I, reacting to this situation? Because what things like Facebook bank on, and sorry, Facebook or any social media, I shouldn't call them out, but it is that immediate feedback, and they want us to be on these sites and sticky. And I got bullied merely for bringing up the experience of like, hey, I met this writer and they were really excited about this. And to now have somebody that I've had a personal interaction, like I did get a little bit, defensive about it. And I had again say, am I reacting or responding? But again, how do we articulate our dissatisfaction in a way that, to Cirroc's point, is non-judgmental, it's not hurtful? And when we're looking at bullying on a whole, we also have to turn in and look at ourselves, because I will admit, I realize now I have bullied people, and maybe I didn't recognize that's what was going on at the time, but I was not skilled enough to get my needs met, and I had different pressures. And looking back, like, okay, like I can see where I've been involved in that. I'm gonna ramble or stop rambling right now, but that's kind of like what we need to look at when we're approaching the space of these online forums, especially with the fan base, and protect each other as well, and call out and reflect back like, hey, that isn't really the nice way to go about saying this. How about we get back to the actual substance of the episode, not, again, the personal attack of what the personal, what the person's life is about. So yeah, so that's how I jumped in on this. Was I just got a little flustered one day.
Mhm. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
Kat, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, I was going to mention and suggest people go out and watch this documentary.
Mhm.
And the documentary is called Best of Enemies. And what it is about is a series of sit-down debates between William F. Buckley and a man named Gore Vidal. And what it is two polar opposites who are both very well educated, articulate, intelligent people arguing two extremes of an idea, left versus right, essentially. And they go into this discussion with each other, as you'll see in the documentary. It's actually the beginning of the news cycle introducing this concept of having two people sit down and debate each other with opposite ideas. And during the course of their debate, and I don't want to, I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler, but during the course of their debate, one of them loses their cool and makes a personal attack on the other guy. They were doing their whole, this is how economics should work. You should do it, trickle down, trickle up, whatever. All their points they were making, trying to figure out, which is the right way, or who's figured it out better. But at the end, the person who loses the debate is the one who cannot keep their cool, who loses his cool and no longer can have an intelligent discussion about a subject matter. Mm-hmm. It's now becoming a personal attack. Well, you're just like this, you're just whatever you want to fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. And that is how you lose. That is how you lose. You lose by losing your cool, by becoming hurtful and attacking somebody personally. You win if you can keep your calm, if you can keep your cool, if you cannot be rattled, if you're if you're thoughtful in your response. One of the things that I was impressed about when I watched Barack Obama first come on the scene and campaign, mm-hmm. I said, wow, this is the first Black guy who has a legitimate chance to be the president of the United States. And he's going through the same processes that all the other presidents have gone through as far as debating and whatnot. But he has the added, pressure of being the first of representative for Black people to be on that stage. Mm-hmm. And so there were many times in which I saw him being interviewed that I felt like the questioner was trying to rattle him and get him to have that emotional response where he just says, whatever it is, mm-hmm. You guys are just or America ain't shit, whatever it was he was going to say. They just tried to get him to say it. It was like, baiting him to just get under his skin. And he was so calm. He was so thoughtful. The more they tried to irritate him, the more casual and loose and comfortable he got, the more relaxed he felt. And it was exactly neutralizing the power of somebody trying to irritate you and disturb you and try to get you to, react and respond. I'm going to get this person to punch me, Mm-hmm. It's like somebody getting all in your face and screaming and snapping around. It's like they're trying to get you to push them or punch them or scream back at them. They want you to respond. There's no way you can be this close in somebody's space and with this kind of energy unless you are trying to elicit a response from somebody. And I feel like if you can control yourself, this is really about self-control. Mm-hmm. And if you can have the self-control to not be bothered by something and to see where somebody's coming from. One of my favorite things that, I got to witness by the great Avery Brooks is how he responds to those kinds of questions and moments. And so when somebody would say something that he felt was trying to elicit that response and trying to unnerve him, he would turn the table back on the person and say something to the effect of, and this is just one kind of a response in a paraphrase in some instances, but what do you mean by that? It's a very simple question, but by flipping it back on the person to explain what they mean by that, instead of first just reacting to what you know and what you think it means,
Yes.
you make them explain it
Mhm.
so that they can hear it for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
They can explain where their hatred is coming from or where their energy is coming from.
Mhm.
And perhaps you might have misunderstood. That's why you give them the opportunity. Perhaps you might just be wrong and they're not trying to attack you, even though it's more likely than not they are if you feel that way. But the way to neutralize it is to put it back on the person, their own energy that they're trying to throw onto you and leave you all irritated and flustered. You can now reverse it back. Well, what do you mean by that? Explain. Tell me, you said this. What do you mean by this?
Yep.
And when you do that, you force somebody to think. You force the person to think and have to really get into detail about either how hateful they are or how you know non-confrontational the thing was, how it was just taken out of context. And if they can explain it so that I understand the context and say, okay, no, I get where you're coming from, yes, now we can discuss and move forward. But to find out where somebody's coming from or what they mean by that, then you can really get to the issue of whether they're trying to attack you or not, or if they're just trying to make a general point.
And that's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
love that as a
go ahead.
tool. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Bon. Go ahead.
I love that. I like to ask people, I'm curious about, can you tell me more about, because sometimes, yeah, we have this, again, our bias is we're going to be the hero of our story. That is the bias we all have going at all times,
Right.
unfortunately and fortunately. But that said, like, sometimes we do catch ourselves like, oh, I was about to jump in on that. But they meant something differently. And I want to pull this back to what Cirroc was saying too about being bullied over, your language and how you speak and things along that lines. It's really imperative that we all just take that pause just to really thoughtfully ask, like, am I adding to the conversation? Am I just posting this, to feel better about myself? And I'll talk into the science about that on another day. I'm going to do like a nice little whiteboard for us because I'm very visual. But that's the bottom line, is that you got to get out of that cycle of the reaction that, Cirroc was discussing and feeding into that, because that is an addictive behavior, unfortunately. That is kind of like what I was talking about, the, regulating. Like, we all have to kind of regulate ourselves back down to being comfortable with having calm conversations, wouldn't you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Ellie, you've had a lot of experience with bullying lately
Yeah.
and what you're seeing. So, getting that younger person's view, because you are the one that's geared into social media even more than what I am. Social media is part of your life now,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So you have been able to overcome a lot of this lately. I know it took you a while, but especially with your
Yes.
cosplay. So a little bit about what you're seeing now
Yeah.
that you are moving into a better, what you feel like not being bullied as much as you were.
Well, I have to say, a lot of happened because when I did a convention in June, that convention opened my eyes, because I did a catwalk where I show my cosplay, and the amount of people who write me back that they see me and I am plus size cosplayer, and they are plus size cosplayers as well, and the amount of people that write me that I inspired them because of they see me how I overcome the bullying and step on the stage is incredible. And also I was bullied about my language too, because English is not my first language, because I am in Europe. So yeah, I get bullies because how I speak, and yeah, English is not my best, but I am trying.
Well, you're doing a
And
phenomenal
yeah,
job at it for what
Yeah.
it's worth. So
Yeah, you do a great job,
Yeah.
Ellie.
You really do. Really do.
thanks.
But you've come a long
And
way. You've
yeah,
come a long way,
um,
because I don't think you feel, after you kind of went after it a little bit and decided that, hey, you know what, I'm going to talk about this. And you got the right people around you. That's the biggest thing, is getting the right people around you. You've seen a difference in the way that you are treated. I mean, you still tell me you get some of it still, but you've seen it change a little bit.
yeah.
And I think a lot of it is that you have showed people that, hey, I can overcome this. Okay, you can give me all this bullying you want, but I'm still going to do what I want to do. And I want to be a Star Trek fan. I want to do the cosplay. Yeah, I've seen a totally different change in your attitude over actually being
Yeah.
able to actually, kind of work through what you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So
Yeah, but sometimes it's not easy, because I'm that type of person. If I get a hate, I am the person who take that, and I have to protest maybe 1 week or 2 weeks. It depends how much the hate I receive, but yeah, I'm definitely doing my best I can. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And it's really great to see that you have been able to overcome this, and you've actually started helping other people with their bullying issues too, at the same time of what you need to do at that point. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
also
Hey,
make
Cirroc.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go ahead first. I have a question written down, but
Okay. I wanted to make several points. One was to distinguish, because we traditionally think of bullying as something that's a physical thing. And, used to grow up and there's the bully at school that would, push you and take your lunch money or whatever it was. So that's the stereotypical idea of a bully. But we've moved on to other kinds of bullying, with this cyberbullying. Words can be used to bully, not just physical. But the thing I wanted to say for the audience that's listening is that the kids that I knew growing up that were bullied for being different, maybe they were called a nerd or a geek or whatever it was, over time, those same kids have become very successful in life. And ironically, the bullies have not. And so, for those of you out there that are bullied, continue to persevere, continue to set your sights on your goals, and allow your success to be the revenge against the bullies. Because the bully mentality is inherently a character flaw. And because you have that character flaw, it is likely you will not achieve the same successes in life. So my advice to those people that are bullied is to understand, hey, these people have a problem. Problem is not with you. Problem is with them and how they think and how their relationships with people and whatever they've gone through. Don't take ownership of that. Let it sit with the person who is the bully. Don't let it, be transferred to you. And also remember that your successes in life will in some way or another shut the bullies up. Now the kids that I grew up that were bullied, they're executives, they're tech giants, they're all over the world, they're doing very well in life. And a lot of the bullies are struggling, to survive and make ends meet because of the mentality of the bully, who is somebody that's combative, who wants conflict. Those kinds of things don't exist well in a workplace. They don't exist well in a team setting. And so if you have those kinds of things, it's going to essentially corrupt whatever business or thing that you're involved in. And those things usually get pushed out of the system. So those of you that are bullies out there, it's no benefit for you in the long run to go out here and harass and disturb people and make people cry and have sleepless nights, because those things will eventually fall back on you in a grand karma cosmic way of the universe. So I just want to make sure that people know that just like I was talking about this timeline of past, present, and future. In the longer timeline of life, those that have been bullied, if they can accept it, if they can move on if they can grow from it, learn from it, become stronger people from it, which I became a stronger person from it. I was, like I said, bullied about how I talk. But how I talk eventually became something that was used to my benefit. And so it might not have been cool in school, but it turned out to be pretty good in other aspects of my life.
Right.
And so, I wasn't in the cool crowd. I didn't get to hang out with you guys over there, but I also found my own way in life, and I used my tools to my advantage. And I think everybody has a set of tools that they could use for their advantage. That's the beauty of life, right? It's like, just because somebody's 7'5" doesn't mean they're a good basketball player.
Nope. Not at all.
There's a little guy out there that's 5'6" that's in the NBA and he's really good, because he has tools that he uses to his advantage. It's not just about who's a giant. So I think, all of us have ways in which we can learn and become better. I think those are Bonnie's talking about the tools that we can use. And I'd like to hear some about those tools, but first, give me your questions, Bonnie. Sorry.
Sure. So I was curious, how old were you? I don't know this off the top of my head. How old were you during Deep Space Nine in that section of your life for filming?
Yeah, so that was 14 to 21, essentially that block right there.
Wow.
So most of the ages of transition into young adulthood. So it's pretty impactful in that time frame. But I was very grateful to be surrounded by people who were not trying to bully me, or somebody like Avery Brooks, who was very protective of me and made sure that I wasn't going to be on the receiving end of certain criticism and things that would upset me. So, Ellie, you had a question?
Do you have a question?
No, I just want to say, what you say, I am example of it, because I was bullied for 13 years, and right now I am making my dream come true, and I'm starting my own business, so I am living my dream. And I am so glad that I have the opportunity to talk about and maybe inspire more and more people to stand up against the bullying. So yeah, that's what I want to say.
Very good. Very good. I know, Cirroc, that your relationship with Aaron Eisenberg also,
Yeah.
during that filming and everything, of having that person with you, that was somewhat, age group related, along with Avery, and the stuff that you had during that period helped you out a lot to get through that time period. I mean, there's a lot of pressure being at your age, being a star, being on television, and still at the same time, I'm sure some bullying can go around that too, like you're doing this and you're doing that. And, acting may not have been as cool to some people as other ones. And why aren't you involved in sports, right? And
Right,
why are you
right.
doing this kind of stuff, And then also being involved in Star Trek, being that geek type of show, so I mean, it's great to hear that you were able to come out and you're the success that you have been. I was bullied in school too. Being a Star Trek fan in the 70s was not cool. It was not cool at all. And I had a lot of things. You talk about the physical stuff, and that was the physical stuff. In the 70s, we didn't have the social media, so it was more the physical. It was, I think we talked about it on our last episode about how, bullies would be a lot more physical. You do things like, one thing that I can always remember is getting swirlies in gym class. And people are always like, so what's a swirly? It's like where they put your head in the toilet, flush the toilet. A lot of that stuff went around at that point in time. But I was able to find a group of friends that actually were involved in what I was involved in. And we grew and we got beyond that, and we protected each other. And that was one thing that really happened great for me. And you're right, as you move on in life, you put what you want, what your goals are, and you wind up achieving those goals. So you got to think beyond what's happening to you at that time. And that happened to me. I mean, I spent a career as a firefighter and a paramedic, and then I do what I do now, which is totally different. But at the same time, I feel good about what I've done. And that bullying stuff is now kind of behind me. I think about it more on a humorous scale than I think about it as that was traumatic for me. I got myself through it. And I think that's what everybody has to look at. I think one of the best things you said on the podcast today was that people just don't talk anymore. That we don't, like you said,
Right.
explain yourself, right? Explain what you're talking about. We don't do that. We automatically go to the worst.
We shut right down.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We go to the worst part of it a lot. And if we could just get to where we could discuss things again, and sit down and say, hey, you know what? I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you please make me understand? Instead of going to that extreme that you should understand what I'm talking about. And so I really think that that's a big point that we need to take, is that we need to explain ourselves, and we need to make the other person explain themselves too. So absolutely. Kat, do you have anything at all?
No, I mean, I think Cirroc made several great points, and Bonnie too. And I always enjoy when we can loop in with Ellie's story, because like Ellie said, she's representative of what's happening now. It's something that continues to happen within our fandom. And I think that we, obviously as a community here, our goal is to invite people in. Like Nana said on the last podcast, she said, instead of calling people out, we should invite them in. And I think that ties in really nicely with Cirroc's point about, what do you mean? And can you help me understand? Instead of, well, you should know better. You should know this. This has been around for so long. And how come you don't understand this about Star Trek? I think it's really the same point, basically, which is where we want to hold bullies accountable to a certain extent. There's that part of us that wants to make them, like, pay for how they treated us. But the truth is that in every day, if I spent all my time, I mean, I could get lost in social media, just hours and hours down the rabbit hole of arguing with people over every little detail about Star Trek that I honestly don't have the time. I'm busy. I do have things I really do care about that take priority in my life. And my priority is not to convince everybody in the world that my theory is correct. And I think it also kind of goes back to the idea of, well, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Sometimes you can be both, but very, very rarely. And so when it comes to social media, it's just, to me, it's people surrounding themselves with what we call the echo chamber. And we only friend the people who follow our line of thinking on politics. We talk to people on social media who like the same, Star Trek series that we like and like the same captain. And we very rarely choose to befriend people who like a totally different starship or like the new stuff and don't like the old stuff. Because there are now Star Trek fans out there who have only known Star Trek Discovery and have grown up with these shows, and they actually do enjoy them. But it just goes back to the same old thing. Whereas if you continue to pursue what you love and you put all your focus on that, you won't hear those bullies. And at the end of the day, you're getting the best revenge you can possibly get, which is to succeed and persevere in what you love and not to let anybody take that power away from you. So yeah. So I think if that's it, if there's anything else anybody wants to add before we wrap up, otherwise I'll take us out.
Cirroc, any
have-
last words of advice real
Oh,
quick?
Bonnie,
Or
yeah.
go ahead, Bonnie, you go first. That's okay.
Well, because Cirroc had asked me for some tools. So for the
Oh,
interest
yeah.
of
There you
time,
go. Go ahead. Sure, absolutely.
what I'm going to do is I want to, not right now, but I'm going to record for everyone walking through how to set up a somatic anchor point in your body. So that way, when you are going through the process of, that respond, react, what am I going to do? It's one of those things that I've utilized to recenter myself when Cirroc was talking about, that egging that can happen, that Avery was talking about as well. Or I'm sorry, about the Barack Obama, that's who your example was. But that said, I'm going to basically wrap that up together. I'm going to pull some other resources, some, anti-bullying, some suicide prevention, pull that together for our website. And then that way we can have it for later. So thank you, everybody.
Very good. Very good. All right.
Fantastic. All right,
Yeah,
great.
and I will
Sorry.
also add that we all have a role to play in this. It's not just between the bully and the bullied. Those are the two people involved in it. There are also other people around in some instances who are witness to what's happening.
Mhm.
And as a witness to what's happening, you have a voice too. You have a voice and you can speak up on something. If you see somebody being obnoxious or treating somebody, terribly, you have a voice too. And you can say, excuse me, you're being rude. I think you need to calm down. You made your point. There's ways in which people can also step in and essentially expose when somebody is out of line. We all get out of line sometimes. You messed up my order. I didn't want onions or whatever it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We all get
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We all get a little bit. We just get set off for some reason.
Yeah.
But there could be a point there where you cross and you're now talking to somebody with no respect and you're demeaning them.
Yep.
Because they made this mistake or whatever it is. And that's where I believe that we all as a community can just take it upon ourselves to say to whoever it is, hey, I think you lost your cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a key point to it, that we're witnesses. And when you're a witness to something, you don't keep your mouth shut. You at least call it out. And that's the biggest thing that we're trying to do with TAB, is to call it out. Let people know when they're being uncool. The more people that do that, the more these people will disappear. Okay, especially if there's more people telling them they're uncool than what you see. And you can see it on social media. You see that some people do jump in and some people do say, hey, you're not being cool, you're not doing this. And I guess you got to also look at where you draw the line of when that person then continues to go on and on and on. And there is that point in time where after you've called them out, you may have to just be quiet about it too. You called them out, let it go.
Well, that's the emotional regulation, is just
Right.
to step away and be like, I am now I'm reacting, not responding.
Right, absolutely. Because sometimes, I've got friends that, bless them, they believe in inclusion, but they go out and they look for arguments to get into. Okay, it's like I'm looking for somebody who doesn't believe in inclusion, and so I think there are some trollers that mean to be good, but they wind up getting into arguments where they wind up being just as bad.
Right.
And then they don't give the cause a good, they don't come out with how do I want to say it? They just don't come out with a good outcome to it all. You know,
And that could be a whole other
you know what I'm
episode.
saying? Yeah, that's a
Right.
whole
Oh,
other episode.
absolutely,
But I
yeah.
can tell you that there's a lot of people. I have friends that do it that I have to say, listen, I get it. You are doing good. You really are. But you have to be careful. Okay. Because we do have the other side of bullying and things that go on that turns into violence. And we have
Right.
seen that lately. We
Right.
have seen some of these people that, you know, that unfortunately have gone violent. So we also have to worry about that at the same time. So you may be on the right side, absolutely, but you still have to watch how you're presenting that right side, and that you're not turning into somebody who's bullying somebody else for something that's a good cause. You know, then you're giving that cause kind of a bad name. So yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that, Rex.
Yeah.
You don't want to become the thing that you're opposed to.
Right.
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 It's like saying, you're a thug and you're hateful and I want to kill you.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Yeah. Like,
you're reflecting the same energy
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
of that. So you have to be able to contrast it. And yes, I don't think you want to become the thing that you're opposed to.
Right.
You don't want to, be a bully trying to stop a bully.
Right.
right.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we see that. We definitely do see that. So that's one thing that
Right. And that's
that
what I've
I-
gotten caught up with in the past.
Right,
And that's why I admit, like, I recognize now looking at behaviors, like I unintentionally or intentionally, for whatever it was, like I inflicted some sort of pressure on another person
Yep.
in a way that made them behave differently just for my benefit. And again, it's that personal accountability amongst all of us to look at.
And I think that's
Absolutely.
where we have the issue. That's where we have the issue is some of these people that go out there and they become violent. You know, instead of we're trying to solve a problem, but we wind up pushing somebody over that point. You know, so we have to recognize that too and make sure that what we're doing is going to have a positive outcome.
Right.
And that's where sometimes, I hate to say it, but there's sometimes that you also have to be quiet, you know, after a while. You know, there's an old saying in sales, and I've been in sales for quite a while. He who speaks first loses. Okay. And it all has to do with the close of the sale, right? You talk to somebody and you're quiet. Let them come back with the information at that point. So there's going to be times that we just have to be quiet and listen to the person, but try not to drive it too far that we do cause them to step over that line, you know, at that point too. So we always got to keep that in mind. So absolutely. All right. We want to wrap us up.
All right. Yeah.
Matt?
Let's wrap this up. I want to
Yeah.
thank our guest on today's podcast, Cirroc Lofton. Make sure you watch him on the Seventhville podcast. It is fantastic.
Yes.
And
You guys.
I also want to thank, of course, our host, Ellie, our tab director, Rex Wood, Bonnie, our newcomer. And of course, we want to thank Ed O'Connell, our associate producer, and our technical director, Scott Jensen. And of course, I'm Kat King. Be sure to
And
follow
we
us
want
on
to thank
Facebook.
Kat.
Yes, I'm here too. I just want to remind everybody to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We do have a website. It's www.tabnation.org, and join us today in our quest to eradicate bullying from the fandom and the universe. Take care, everybody.